Is there an age where change truly becomes impossible? Or is that just a story we tell ourselves to make staying the same feel safer? I am 96 years old as I speak these words. I have lived long enough to watch entire generations rise, struggle, adapt, and fade. I have seen habits form like grooves carved into stone, and I have seen those same grooves soften, shift, and sometimes disappear entirely. So when people say to me, "It's too late now," I don't hear wisdom. I hear fear wearing the mask of realism. For most of my life, I believed habits were permanent once they hardened. I believed that who I was at 40 would simply continue aging forward, like a photograph slowly yellowing at the edges. I believed that mistakes accumulated interest, and that by a certain age the bill came due and could no longer be renegotiated. Those beliefs felt logical. They felt adult. They were also wrong. I did not wake up one morning in my 70s or 80s feeling young again. My body aged, as all bodies do. My history did not vanish. What changed was something quieter and far more powerful, the realization that the next decision was still mine, not the past, not the damage already done, just the next choice. When you reach this age, you understand something younger people rarely do. Time does not disappear all at once. It narrows. And in that narrowing, habits become louder. They either support you or they weigh on you. That is when the lie becomes most tempting. Why bother now? I am here to tell you why. Because change does not belong to youth. It belongs to consciousness, and consciousness does not retire. This is not a story about miracles or reversals. It is a story about possibility, real, grounded human possibility, available even at 96, especially then. I remember exactly when the idea first settled into me that change had an expiration date. It wasn't dramatic. There was no announcement. It arrived quietly, disguised as maturity. Somewhere in my 40s, people stopped asking what I might become and started asking what I had been. Conversation shifted from dreams to summaries, from possibilities to stories already told. And without noticing, I accepted the suggestion that my inner shape had hardened for good. By the time I reached my 60s, that suggestion had turned into a rule. At your age, they would say, meaning well. At your age, don't expect too much. At your age, be realistic. At your age, this is just how things are. Each sentence sounded reasonable on its own. Together, they built a prison with no locked door, only habits of thinking that told me not to try opening it. The most dangerous lie about being too old is not that change is impossible. It is that effort is pointless, that even if you tried, it wouldn't matter now, that whatever benefit might come would arrive too late to be meaningful. I believed this for years, and because I believed it, I stopped paying attention to my own behavior. I didn't ask why I reacted the way I did. I didn't question patterns that drained me. I told myself that self-examination was a young person's game. But habits don't stop forming just because we stop noticing them. They continue quietly, like sediment settling at the bottom of a river. Emotional habits, thought habits, physical routines. By my early 70s, I was more predictable than I had ever been, not wiser, just more automatic. And that is when discomfort finally caught my attention. It did not arrive as a crisis. It arrived as heaviness. Days felt narrower. Reactions felt faster and duller at the same time. I found myself saying the same sentences, having the same complaints, avoiding the same small discomforts. That was when a question surfaced that I could not ignore. If this is fixed now, when did it become fixed? I could not find the moment. There was no clear line, only a slow surrender. That question cracked something open. I began to notice that the claim, "I can't change anymore," was not coming from my body. My body had limits, yes, but it was still responding to care, still adapting in small ways. The claim was coming from my mind, from a habit of interpretation, from years of rehearsing the same explanation for why I did what I did. And if that explanation was a habit, then it was not a fact. It was a pattern. This was the first mechanism of change I discovered, though I didn't have language for it then. Awareness interrupts automation. You cannot change what you cannot see, but the moment you see it clearly, it is no longer running the show alone. At 74, I did not suddenly become flexible and energetic, but I became observant. I began to pause before certain reactions, just a breath, just a moment of noticing. That pause was small, but it mattered. It proved something essential. Time had not taken away my ability to choose. People often imagine change as something dramatic, a reinvention, a transformation visible from the outside. That image alone discourages the elderly. It feels unrealistic. What I learned instead is that change usually begins as subtraction, not addition. I did not add new ambitions. I removed small, automatic behaviors that were costing me energy. I stopped arguing with memories. I stopped rehearsing old grievances as if they still needed my supervision. That was not optimism, that was efficiency. Another objection people raise is, the damage is already done. I understand this one deeply. By the time you reach my age, you are well acquainted with consequence. Choices echo. Some doors truly do not reopen, but this objection confuses two different things: irreversibility and irrelevance. The fact that something cannot be undone does not mean that what you do next has no value. Direction still matters, even when distance is limited. Here is a truth that only age makes obvious. Quality does not require infinity. A habit practiced for 5 years can still radically alter how those 5 years feel. Emotional habits, especially, respond quickly to attention. When I stopped feeding certain thoughts, resentments, self-criticism, imagined futures that frightened me, I felt lighter within weeks, not cured, not young, but clearer, more present. That presence changed how I experienced my remaining time, which is the only time anyone ever has. There is also a misunderstanding about effort. People think changing habits late in life requires enormous willpower. In my experience, the opposite is true. Younger people fight habits while building lives. Older people change habits while simplifying lives. At 96, my world is smaller. That makes patterns easier to see, not harder. When your schedule is crowded, habits hide. When it is quiet, they reveal themselves. Physically, change is slower but not absent. I am careful here because this is not a medical story, bodies age. Healing is not guaranteed, but responsiveness does not vanish. When I adjusted how I moved through my day, more deliberately, more gently, more consistently, my body responded with less strain. Not perfection, improvement. And improvement matters. Psychologically, change is even more available. The brain does not stop learning because the calendar advances. What changes is motivation. Fear replaces curiosity. Once I recognized that fear was doing the talking, I stopped treating it like wisdom. I didn't fight it. I questioned it. That alone shifted my inner climate. The last objection is the quietest and perhaps the saddest. It won't matter now. This assumes that meaning is measured only by duration. But at 96, I can tell you that depth counts more than length ever did. A calmer mind, a kinder reaction, a day lived with less inner resistance. These are not small rewards. They are the substance of life itself. Change did not arrive as a miracle. It arrived as a series of modest decisions repeated often enough to alter my trajectory. I did not escape aging. I escaped resignation. And that is the difference between merely lasting and truly living at any age. By the time I accepted that change was still possible, a new problem appeared. I did not know how to change anymore. Motivation alone was not enough. I had tried that before. Promises to myself faded. Good intentions dissolved into familiar routines. If the title I now live by is true, that it is never too late, then there had to be a method that respected age, limitation, memory, and reality. What I discovered is that late life change follows different rules than early life change. It is quieter, slower, more intelligent. The first rule is this: habits do not respond to pressure, they respond to structure. When I was younger, I relied on force, deciding, pushing, insisting. At 96, force backfires. The nervous system resists it. What works instead is redesigning the environment in small, almost unnoticeable ways. I stopped asking myself to be better and started asking, what makes the better choice easier right now? If I wanted to move more, I didn't plan exercise. I placed my chair farther from the window so I had to stand to see the light. If I wanted to be calmer, I didn't command peace. I removed the sources that agitated me, certain conversations, certain news, certain repeated thoughts I had been feeding for years. This is behavioral change at its most honest, less heroics, more engineering. The second rule is one change at a time. Younger people often stack goals because they are racing an imagined clock. At my age, urgency is unnecessary. Precision matters more. I learned that changing one habit, just one, creates a ripple. When my mornings became calmer, my reactions softened. When my reaction softened, my evenings felt lighter. Habits are not isolated, they are linked. Pull one thread, and the pattern shifts. Psychologically, the greatest shift came when I stopped treating identity as fixed. I had spent decades saying things like, "I've always been this way," as if that sentence described reality. In truth, it described repetition. The mind confuses familiarity with inevitability. Once I saw that, I began to speak differently to myself. Not affirmations, observations. This is a habit, not a truth. That distinction alone loosened its grip. There is also grief involved in late life change, and no one talks about this enough. Changing habits means admitting that you could have lived differently before. That realization can sting. It did for me, but I learned not to turn that sting inward. Regret is only poisonous when it becomes judgment. When it becomes information, it is useful. I let myself feel sadness without letting it become a verdict on my worth. Physiologically, change works through consistency, not intensity. The body at 96 does not need extremes. It needs signals it can trust. Regularity tells the body that it is safe to adapt. Sudden demands tell it to defend. When I changed how I ate, how I rested, how I breathed through moments of stress, I did it gently and repeatedly. Over time, my system responded, not dramatically, reliably. This is an important boundary to state clearly. Change does not erase consequences. Some stiffness remained, some fatigue remained, some losses are permanent. But suffering decreased because resistance decreased. That distinction matters. Much of what people call suffering in old age is not pain itself, but the fight against what is already here. When habits shift from fighting reality to working with it, energy returns. Another mechanism of change surprised me most of all: attention. Where attention goes, habits follow. I stopped watching myself fail and started watching myself succeed in small ways, not to praise myself, but to learn. When did calm appear? What preceded it? When did tension spike? What triggered it? Curiosity replaced criticism. Curiosity is sustainable at any age. People ask me whether it is harder to change habits after decades of repetition. The answer is both yes and no. Yes, the grooves are deep, but no, because repetition also makes patterns obvious. A younger mind is distracted by possibility. An older mind sees sequences clearly. That clarity is an advantage if you use it. One of the most important habits I changed was how I spoke about time. I stopped saying what's left and started saying what's here. The future may be shorter, but it is not thinner. Each day still contains choices, reactions, sensations, meaning. When you stop measuring life by quantity alone, quality becomes actionable again. Behaviorally, I learned to anchor new habits to existing ones. I did not create new routines. I adjusted old ones. After washing my hands, I took one slow breath. When sitting down, I checked my posture. When irritation appeared, I delayed my response by 5 seconds. These are not grand strategies. They are humble ones, and they work because they respect reality. The final mechanism is the most difficult to accept and the most liberating. You do not need to become someone else. Change does not require reinvention. It requires alignment. The idea that you must start over keeps many elderly people frozen. In truth, you only need to start where you are, with what you already do, and adjust the direction slightly. Over time, those slight adjustments accumulated. My days felt less heavy. My thoughts felt less repetitive. My reactions felt less sharp. None of this made headlines, but it made life livable in a deeper way. And that is the kind of change that matters most when time is precious. At 96, I did not gain more years. I gained more presence within them. That is not a miracle. It is a method. Now at 96, I can say this without hesitation. The idea that it becomes too late to change is not a fact of aging. It is a habit of thinking. And like all habits, it can be questioned, weakened, and replaced. I did not change my life by erasing the past. I carried it with me. Every mistake, every missed opportunity, every season of unconscious living came along for the journey. Change did not demand that I deny those things. It asked only that I stop letting them decide what came next. That is the difference between regret and wisdom. Regret says the story is over. Wisdom says the story is still being written, even if the pages are fewer. What age teaches you, if you let it, is that time was never the true obstacle. Distraction was. Fear was. The belief that identity hardens into stone was. When those beliefs loosen, even slightly, choice reappears. And where choice exists, habits can shift. Slowly, imperfectly, humanly. This is why the promise matters. Not because change guarantees happiness or health or redemption. It does not. The promise matters because it restores agency. It returns ownership of the next decision to the person living it. Whether you are 30 or 96, that ownership is the same. I do not offer you a miracle. I offer you permission. Permission to stop waiting for the right time. Permission to make small adjustments without demanding perfection. Permission to believe that effort still counts even now. If you remember nothing else from my years, remember this. The future has never belonged to the past. It belongs to the next choice. And as long as you are here to make one, it is not too late.